John Wilkin, got a couple of quotes for you. I've noticed even people who claim everything is predestined and that we can do nothing to change it look before they cross the road.
Okay.
We are just an advanced breed of monkeys on a minor planet on a very average star, but we can understand the universe that makes us something very special.
Very good.
Do you know who said that?
Stephen Hawking.
Correct. This is out of your league.
I didn't know that. I'm actually... Cheers.
You've read A Brief History of Time.
I have indeed. Yes.
Don't forget, you can download Out of Your League via Apple Podcasts, Podbean, Spotify. You can get us on YouTube as well, where you can watch all the episodes. And you can get in touch, as always, at Super League on social media. Use the hashtag Out of Your League. We're with you every week, right up until just after the grand final. Stephen Hawking.
You didn't think I'd get that, Will?
I didn't think you'd
No,
get
that was a trap.
It was a trap.
What Will was trying to do was prove I hadn't read a book, which I have read.
Do you know what else he said? He said, we only have to look at ourselves to see how intelligent life might develop into something we wouldn't want to meet. Two people I do want to meet. One we've already met.
Wow, what a segue.
I said Mr. Damian Hughes, Professor Damian Hughes. I think we should use that terminology, shouldn't we? Welcome back, Damian, because we've spoken to you before. Great to have you with us. And Mr. Kevin Brown.
Just Mr.
Yeah, no, it's a bit of a letdown.
Not professor, not a professor yet. Can we get to professor status?
Never.
No.
Never ever.
Just as simple as that. Damian, for those who don't know, is an international speaker, author of a lot of best-selling books, one of which...
Will goes to get book.
Oh.
Thanks for the commentary, John. I actually brought this down with me. The Winning Mindset, which is spectacular. Hold it up to that camera there. There's a few, Damian, aren't there? Which I don't know which one you're most proud of, but Liquid Leadership, Liquid Thinking, The Winning Mindset, The Barcelona Way, many. Which one are you most proud of, by the way?
I quite like that one.
Yeah?
I'm proud of that one.
Yeah. Nice. I might get him to sign that one for me. Okay.
Thank you.
Damian has been praised by the likes of Sir Richard Branson, Muhammad Ali, Tiger Woods, Johnny Wilkinson, Sir Alex Ferguson. I want to start, Damian, with a tweet from you today.
Go on.
Which read, the world seems to have too many people trying to teach and not enough people trying to learn.
Yeah.
Elaborate.
Well, it was a response to social media that I've been working with the Scotland rugby guys as they go for in rugby union, as they go for this autumn's World Cup.
And Sean White.
Out in Japan. Yeah, and Sean's been up there. And it was just an interesting response. It was a lot of the emotion. So they played on Saturday night and had a pretty poor performance in the first warm-up game. And there was an awful lot of sort of criticism being aimed at the coaches and some of the players. And some of it, the bits I read, were quite personal. And I think, having read some of the responses from the coaches, I thought they were quite measured. And it seems to be an awful lot of people telling them what they should be doing rather than trying to understand and learn what the coaches were actually trying to do.
Isn't it funny? Why does criticism always take a personal slant? Why does it? Like, why do people choose to make it personal?
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because it's like if you were to criticise somebody's philosophy, that's a matter of conjecture, isn't it? You can say, well, I disagree with the style that you're trying to do, but some of it was, even referring to some of these coaches as deluded or being like living in a fairyland and things like that, and like having seen these coaches respond in quite measured, calm ways and try to explain and articulate lots of different styles. So it was more an interesting response to the fact that there was an awful lot of people telling them what you should be doing rather than trying to understand.
Just explain for people watching, people listening who haven't read the books, you should do, because they're brilliant, your 5 steps to a winning mindset as sort of succinctly as you can do.
Well, what I did was, I was asked to go and meet an awful lot of sports coaches around the world and have a look at their methodologies about how they go about doing it. And what I found was, just observing a lot of these coaches, the best ones, there was 5 things that were consistently present from all these coaches, whether it was basketball, boxing, rugby league, football, swimming, Aussie rules football. These coaches were doing pretty much 5 things consistently, and I gave it the acronym STEPS just because to help it make it more memorable. So they kept things really simple. They didn't claim to have the answers. They got the players to think for themselves rather than just tell them what to do. They were emotionally intelligent, so they recognised you were dealing with people that just happened to play sport. They were very practical. There wasn't a lot of jargon in the way that they spoke, and they were great storytellers. So they understood that storytelling was a great way of coaching and getting a point across. So it was those 5 things that you'll see pretty much present with all great coaches. They seem to keep playing them almost on a carousel, that their sessions seem to be around that. So I wanted to write a book that tried to make it accessible for anyone, whatever their domain, whether they were in teaching, whether it was in business, whether it was dealing with your own kids, about, well, what could I do that could take the same methodologies and show some of the psychology behind it of this is why it works.
You two have all come across Damian before, haven't you? Both of you. I mean, you've worked with Sale Sharks, Warrington, England Rugby League, GB Rugby League.
Yeah.
Kev, what were your first memories of meeting Damian? How much did he help you?
Yeah, it was good. It was a brief encounter, and he spoke to the group, and it was about the steps and the honesty and the simplicity of stuff. Especially the bigger game, you always think, you've got to do something different, and this is what me and John were speaking about before. Sometimes, and most times, the simple, basic way is the best way. You just need to do that better. And I've had plenty of psychologists and people trying to help through rugby, and I think Wayne Bennett's been the best coach I've had, and he had one with him, sort of coaching him and coaching the team all the time. And as soon as we went into camp, we filled a form. It was 150 questions, so it was quite painful, but the outcome, it labelled you in a term of, can't remember them all, but I was a thinker, enforcer, and it not an enforcer like I'm going to beat you up or anything, but like a leader, and you got put into these sort of subgroups, and he treated you different, where I remember Mark Percival was labelled a mozzie, so he didn't think about anything, he was all over the place, and so we give him very little information. He just said play, because as soon as he put that information into his head, he was thinking, I can't do it, but as soon as he just played, where I needed the information, and then I needed to express to my teammates and make everyone feel comfortable, and then I felt comfortable. So it was probably when, I think it was Dr. Phil who we had, he taught us so much, and I got so much out of that in terms of not just for the field, my mental health away from it. And I've never struggled, but it was just a tool, and simple tools about clicking our things and stuff. Whenever you had a negative thought, you could you can't outthink a negative thought. He always said do a physical action, and it's been great for me. My missus is sick of me clicking my fingers now. Like,
Is that your cue?
that's my cue. So if I'm ever struggling, I'm not going to keep it.
Do you guys think that everyone can adopt a winning mindset? Is it feasible for everyone?
Yeah, from my perspective, I think of course it is. I think there's certain habits and disciplines in life. The strategies that Damian may talk about in all of your books actually, I think are things that can be learned and can be through discipline and through process become part of your life. That being said, there's all sorts of things that interrupt that being the case, isn't there?
Yeah.
And it's very hard to revisit some. When you're in your everyday life, you very rarely. What we just had a chat about is it's easy to retrospectively look at something, analyse it, and then go, we should have done it like this, and try and change your behaviours then. I think it's so difficult to change those behaviours in the present. Usually it's retrospective. We try and do it.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think to answer that question, there's a question beforehand of how open are you to want to do something different, because if you're not and you've got no interest in that, your improvements are going to be really quite minimal. So, like Kevin, John will give you examples of teammates that you've had where so you might have somebody come in and they just won't have a bat of it. They're just not interested. And therefore, there's no point in wasting your time trying to engage people like that, because they don't want to engage. They've already made up their mind it'll be a waste of time.
But a lot of those people will never live their potential because they're not open to it, and because they can't adopt that mindset. There must be thousands of sportsmen and women who could deliver things on the pitch which they never will do because of that.
Yeah, but I think it's always important to... So I think people can get caught up in the idea of I can achieve anything, and the reality is you can't, but you can get better from where your starting position is. So it's not about saying that we could win the 100 metres in the Olympic Games, because there's a base level of talent that would get you on that starting line, but you can get faster from wherever you start from if you're open to looking at different ways of doing it. So you're right that there's a lot of people sort of not tapping into their full potential, often because they're closed in the way that they want to approach it.
Was that common in rugby league, guys? For people not to be open to it? They are
massively common, and you hear people say, well, I've always done it like this and it's always worked for me, but they're still having bad games every now and again, so they're not perfect. No one's perfect, you know. Sam Burgess, Andy Farrell, they were never perfect, but I think all the best players are open to reaching the potential, and I think if, you know, like you say, everyone's got a different level where they can reach, but if you're always open to different things, then you can reach your potential. And it's only probably in the last part of my career that psychology's become a big thing, and you know how much your brain can help you. And I think more in England than anywhere, we play that many games. Well, we were speaking before about how you can just get mentally fatigued after 20 rounds, 30 rounds, because you've not had a break, and just little simple things that you can do can help you. So,
do you think that helps the older that you get? And you guys are what, mid to late 30s?
No, I was going to say that I think you have to be a certain age. I think there's an age in your career where physically everything's right, but you don't have the mental capacity to
because you
be
can
at
rely,
your
but you
best.
can rely on the physicality then
Well,
when you're younger.
Yeah, physicality is probably your asset when you're a younger athlete, and the mental side of the game, your mental approach to the game, to preparing to play, to performing, to reaching your potential. I just don't think it's there. The older you get, there's probably a sweet spot in your career where physically and mentally you're open to reaching your potential. You understand the impacts of mental preparation, of leadership, of being like an architect for the culture of your team. And then there's a point where I'm at now, where mentally my approach is as sharp as it's been in terms of how I understand what I need to do. But physically, I'm just probably not capable of doing it. And
I think also as well, when you're a bit younger, there's a bit of fear about you that you don't want to look like, you want to look confident, you want to look like you know what you're doing. So you're a bit afraid of going, do you know what I could do with a bit of help, or because you're trying to perceive that you've got it all and you're ready to go, but it's only till you get a bit older that you know it's not a sign of weakness that, do you know what, I was really nervous before that big game. Is there anything I could have done before that? Because the amount of people you speak to, and was you nervous before the game? No, definitely not. And you can see them throwing up in the corner, or you know, and they're lying to try and convince themselves that they don't need help. And like John says, there is a really happy medium where they both meet and you want to get better.
So surely from a coaching point of view then, that would, if I'm thinking, okay, I'm a coach and I want to get the best out of my players at all ages, to be able to tap into a 21-year-old kid who's clearly got the potential on the pitch for whatever sport she's playing, that you then are unable to unlock that mindset side of them in their 20s.
Yeah.
What kind of beast could you unleash then?
Yeah, exactly. Well, so the way I often encourage players, but more coaches, to think about it as four pillars. So you go physically, tactical, technical, and that's where most coaches then go, right, if they're good enough and I've given them a game plan and I know they've got the right skills, and they stop thinking, and you go, but the fourth pillar, psychological, can be that, you know, like, it's almost like having a wobbly table. You need all four of them there. If you're missing one, they become unstable, so you put them under pressure and you're not confident they can maintain the technical, the tactical or the physical prowess. So you need all four, and when you get coaches to start investing the time in those areas equally, that's where you start to tap into really healthy environments.
And who are the best exponents of coaching wise of that, you know, those pillars? Who are the best coaches you've seen embed those pillars?
I've seen quite a few. Like I've seen like boxing's always a really good one. That I did a biography many years ago of Tommy Hearns, who was like a 5-weight world champion that went through the divisions in the 70s and 80s. And I went out to Detroit to go and meet his coach, was a man called Emmanuel Stewart, and he subsequently coached like Lennox Lewis when he was the heavyweight champion, and he was fantastic at it. That he was probably, and I say this with the greatest respect, probably one of the least educated men I'd ever met, but he was the most street smart by a million miles, because he'd done it for 40 years at the hard end. And he gave me a great distinction once. He said, I don't coach boxers, I coach men that just happen to box. And it was very much around putting the person at the heart of it, treating them with respect, dignity, making them feel welcome. You can make a mistake, I'm not going to be hammering you for doing it. And he created that sort of emotional, intelligent environment where young boys, as it was in this case, could come in, feel safe within his company. And then therefore, and he used to then say, I've got millions of dollars worth of information to give you, but I need to create the environment to give you that information. And you get these young lads that weren't educated in any level, opened up to quite complex examples. So I've seen it in individual sports like that. And then in team sports, somebody like people, I did a book on Ferguson years ago, and I think he was very good at it, putting, like, there's the assumption of him with the hairdryer and things like that, but you speak to a lot of players that talk about him, they all talk about the dignity, the respect, the decency of him was really quite powerful.
And all of this is dependent on society, isn't it? Which is a big topic. And I'm interested, Damian, with the books that you've written over the years. And I think your first one was sort of 2006, 7, something like that, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's about that. Yeah.
So going back to then, society's changed massively. The world that we live in today is an Instagram world.
Yeah.
What do you make of the world that we live today with these principles?
Yeah. Well, I'm often loath to go down the route of talking about millennials or different generations, because I don't feel like we've evolved quick enough to make any changes. I think inherent decency and treating people with respect and kindness and essentially putting people at the heart of what you do are timeless values that I feel are still there. I get your point about sometimes, like when England under 17s, the football won the World Cup and they all turn the shirts around to see the name on it and things like that. And you see that, like, the cult of the egotist.
But there's an obsession to impress.
Yeah, I agree with that. But then, and I've read a few quotes from sort of American sports stars that say, like, don't get caught up with these images of success when you don't see all the hard work that goes in underneath it, which goes back a little bit to that quote that you read out that I tweeted about today, this idea of you've got people that are trying to explain their methodology, and because you don't get the outcome, people immediately start labelling them fantasists or criticising them. So I think we're a bit too quick. I think our patience levels are a little bit shorter than they were generationally, just because everything is instant. If you want an answer, you Google it, you get the response. So I think we're not prepared to value people working hard and for success to take a while to come.
One thing I think really interests me, and I think it's great that Kev's here to discuss this as well, is that feeds into this sort of short-termism that life is. Instant feedback, instant gratification, maybe quick solutions to a short problem. And
corner cutting, that's what we are.
Well, no, it's not corner cutting. I'm not trying to say that's what it is, but it's in a lot of the philosophies and things that you speak about, it would be perceived that there's a time period needed in some cases, in a coaching sense, to, in your book, The Barcelona Way, we talk about this long-held culture that sort of has a long period of time. How do you then, in a short-term environment like sport, help get those things in place?
So often where I prefer to work is with the coaches as opposed to just the playing group. So I'm available to help players if they want them, but I'd rather work with the coaches because I feel that they're the ones with real credibility. So I often say, if I stand up in front of a room full of players, depending on my relationship with the group, 75% of them might buy into it, but you'll get 25% that'll go, I'm not having this. Yeah. Whereas when the coach stands up and delivers the same message, because he picks a team, 95% of the room will buy into it and do what he says. So I prefer working with the coaches, and that's where often a lot of the work is done before they're ever standing in front of a group. So for a coach that gets appointed, I can say, make sure that you interview the guys that have appointed you. So get patience from them, get them to buy into the process, because it won't happen quickly, it won't happen instantly. And that's where, like, you see the stats, don't you? Like, I know the stats in football rather than rugby league, but like 55% of managers are sacked within the first 16 months of doing the job, and the vast majority of them never get another shot at it again. So that encourages this idea of short-termism, just go and try and get results rather than build for the long term.
Yeah, it's one of the companies. It's probably a myth, isn't it, in football? Like, there's certain behaviours that have always existed. Football's one of the worst for me. Like, I look at football and think some of the decisions that are made purely based on emotion or sentiment or this perceived wisdom about a certain action, like bringing in a particular manager who's likely to keep you up, or sacking somebody in such a short period of time. Yeah, it's like mental concepts for me. But I've seen this year, Kev, with Lee, in terms of their approach to this season, that in a different way, short-term sort of approach, haven't they? Because they've heavily recruited towards the back end of the year. So started off with a relatively skinny squad and heavily recruited towards the back end of the year.
So obviously the owner pulled back. They threw everything at it a couple of years ago. They bought all these superstars and went, go and win the title. Couldn't do it. I think Marwan Kukash did the same at Salford. Didn't work. This year he pulled right back and they had 9 players in pre-season. And I said to a couple of lads how refreshing it was that foundation that you speak about, it was all about playing for the jersey, being honest. It's going to take a process of time to get to where they want to be. And now they've added quality through the year that fit with that group rather than putting a load of individual players together and try and forget about the group. So they've done it that way and they've had the best season that they've had. No one would have given them a chance to finish in the top 5. And now all of a sudden they're talking about promotion. So I don't think it's just Lee who have shown the blueprint. I think any sporting organisation, if they've got the foundations of honesty, where you can pull your mates up and everyone's accountable, not just the younger players who are easy targets. I think that's massive. And I just think that long-term planning and not being emotional over results, which everyone's guilty of that. After a game you say something and I think social media is massive about it. When we started playing, you got called on the fans, then you go home and you wouldn't hear anything else. You go home now, you switch your phone on, you're getting it on Facebook, Instagram, social, Twitter. You can't avoid it. No. So when people say, don't look at what fans say, you used to have to avoid a fans forum. Now you simply cannot avoid it. So I think the young players now, we should probably do something for them in terms of this is how when you get abused, because you are, no matter how good you're going to be, you're going to get abused, and don't have a couple of drinks and abuse them back. It should be a rule, number 1, that the RFL or a football association put into everyone's contract.
I asked, this sounds like a big name job, but I'll explain the concept. There was a lad last year with Scotland who I got a message off him and he said he'd been called up in the squad. And he phoned me up and he said, would you come? And I went to meet him and he showed me his Twitter feed and it was vile. It was somebody else should have been picked, not him, according to these people, but it was all proper vile abuse. And it bothered him. He admitted that he went out for his club and he was trying to do something special. And he said, I was thinking of these people off, how to prove them wrong. And he said, and they had a disaster of a game. So the week after, I found myself in company with J.K. Rowling's husband. Right. And I asked him, I thought, well, she's pretty prolific on social media. So I asked him, I said, how does your wife deal with it? I imagine and he said, oh, you want to see the abuse. And she came to the idea where he said, she enjoys social media, but not through her. So he said, so if you see J.K. Rowling's account, she doesn't go near it. Yeah. So she'll post official stuff, but she's got a private account that only family and friends know. So she can enjoy social media without anybody getting access to.
I think that's the way it's going, because obviously when I left Widnes and went to Warrington, I got that much abuse. I just came off it all, and I didn't want to come off it all because I had a lot of friends in Australia and New Zealand and that's how I sort of kept in touch with them all. So I came off it, and I just have Instagram now, which is so much better in terms of avoiding abuse. Is it? Oh well. I can relatively. Relatively, you're not speaking as much, and when you put something at your kid, you don't really get as much abuse. It's a bit, there's a line, and there's only a few people want to cross that one. But I've just found it refreshing having time off. But I think it's sad that the social media is really good, and I think we should embrace it because it's a really good tool. But when it's almost like anyone can say what they want on there, and they wouldn't say it, if you was just down in the car park. But then a lot of the time, I always tell myself now, because I've had that much abuse over the probably last 4 or 5 years, that when I actually look into the accounts, I would never care if I was sat at the side of them and they said it. It just wouldn't bother me. But when you're reading it and you think,
it's in your own home, innit?
Yeah, and you think, I shouldn't. Yeah, but it does affect you.
But that's a fascinating topic because, for example, you look at John Wilkins' Instagram account, it's this, again, it goes back to this obsession to impress. Pictures of my dogs in an artisan coffee shop. It's pathetic. And I encourage people to go out of their way to troll John Wilkins.
Will's doing this
he
because
thrives off the stuff.
I got rid of it all the same about 3 years ago. I got rid of everything. The reason why is because I was spending my time looking at other people's lives. And it was like, I had this epiphany on the toilet. I sat on the toilet, yeah, exactly. It's probably sat on the toilet just looking at pictures of other people doing good stuff. And then almost feeling like my day was bad. And I was like, this is crazy.
Well, let's tap into that, because Damian, where does that mentality come from? Firstly, the troll mentality. Was it always present before the days of social media and Instagram?
Yeah,
and
I think so.
Why is it intensified so much now? And particularly the anonymity behind it.
Yeah, and I think that gives you the safety. I mean, it is a fascinating topic, because the way I try to explain it to young players is because you don't want, like this particular lad when he showed me his Twitter feed, and you go, you're a 24-year-old lad, so to say don't go on it, you go, but you've grown up on it. It's your generation, so why should you limit yourself for something that could be quite enjoyable? And in this lad's case, he was trying to build a business on the back of it as well, so like using his following. And so the way we try to explain it to them is we introduce them to the Dunning-Kruger law. And the Dunning-Kruger is named after a couple of psychologists that said, if you're stupid, you're too stupid to know just how stupid you are. So the idea is, when we say, apply that law. So if you wanted to, a bit like Kev said, go and have a look at the people writing this abuse to you. And you'll find that when somebody says, I could have played better than Kev did at weekend, you go, if you look at the lad, he's too stupid to realise how talented Kev is and how hard the sport is. Yeah, was it? Right.
It wasn't me.
But he's too stupid to understand the demands of what you're actually trying to execute to be able to make a rational decision. So you go, why would you want to give validity to... Now, if it was your coach or... like 100%. Your partner or people that didn't appreciate the value and the hard work and the effort it's taken to get where you are in your career, and they said, I could have done better than that, you'd listen. Yeah. But if it's a stranger that has got no concept of how hard what you're trying to execute is, why would that be irrelevant?
I'm convinced there's young players coming through now who play poor, but as long as their image looks good on social media, they're happy. It's frightening, but I'm convinced. I'm 100% convinced.
You think that's the priority?
That the image is the main thing rather than the performance.
Yeah, the perception of being a professional sportsman is more attractive than the reality. The reality of being a professional sportsman is every day is hard work. It's hard work from start to finish. Like, it's discipline. It's physically, mentally batters you down. It's rewarding and excruciatingly painful in the same. No, but it worries me that young professional people would idolise the material gain of being a sportsman than the essence of it. The essence of it is deeper than that for me. Like, I've always wanted to compete. I'd compete if I didn't get paid to compete. And it's easy, retrospectively now, easy for me to say I'd play rugby if I didn't get paid, but I would have done. I know I would have done. And I found it interesting. There was an ASICS advert. It was years ago, but it like stuck with me, and it's always stuck with me. And it's be about.
Can you say this with your sponsorship with New Balance? Are you sure you want to go down?
It's fine. It's absolutely fine. New Balance are better trainers, but it was a great advert. It said, "Be about the days that people don't see, not the days that they do." And to me, I thought, wow, that was powerful. You know, just for an advert, you think, and I watched it and I was like, whoa, that's a career in rugby. And you know, you spoke about sources of wisdom in your career. The only people I would ever listen to in my career are the people who see the days that don't matter. Yeah. The days that don't matter for me. I'll take judgment off them every day. And they're the ones who, when they criticise me, when I've been criticised, are the only people in my life who I'd listen to.
See, John is one of these people, though, that as much as he'll deny this, the abuse, water off a duck's back and so on, but it does really get to him, and I can see it, and I know it does. But in terms, it does. It's true. That's why he's laughing. It was a nervous laugh. In terms of abuse, and we look at the level of abuse. And in the words of David Brent, we're all in our 30s here, aren't we? Just about. And for me, when you look at kids, teens, 14, 15, 16 upwards, that when you actually look at it, I find it quite refreshing, because I like to know that there are freaks out there, because if it was all very praiseful and so on and praiseworthy, it would be quite a boring place to live, wouldn't it? But when you look at some of the level of abuse and how intense it is, there seems to be, no remorse and no line these days, more so than there ever was 10, 15 years ago when I was growing up.
Yeah, but I also think it's like, so like when you're driving a car and the abuse that people, like the way people behave in the cocoon of a car was, if you can imagine walking down the street and like, you fucking wanker, somebody, because there's a consequence that they might stick one on you. If you walk, but yeah, so it's like that safety of, if I'm online then I can drop the C-bomb on you. And I know that there's no second
consequences.
Yeah, so I often talk to people about this idea of second order consequences. So I'll say, you're welcome. So if I'm working with someone, I say, you're welcome to challenge me, disagree with me. We can, if you want more information, we can have that discussion. And you're welcome to do that, and we'll do it polite and respectful, and hopefully we both walk away. But if you choose to say nothing, you don't get to walk out of here and complain about our meeting. You don't get to walk out of here and say, oh, that was shit, because you go, but you didn't give me the chance to make any amends. And it's always the second order consequences. We need to understand that if I abuse you, there's a consequence that you might come and take action against me. And what online does is there's no second order consequence. I can do it, and I know that nobody's going to call me out.
I think and I hope it'll go full circle, because it's really refreshing now when you do see someone coming through who's full of integrity, full of hard work, and isn't bothered, isn't image conscious. We've got a kid at Warrington, Joe Philbin, not one bit bothered, just goes hard all the time. And I think Owen Farrell's a little bit similar. He's just ultra competitive, not really bothered about social media. And I'm hoping it'll come back and that'll be the trend.
Well, realistically, the guys who you speak about who are image conscious, very rarely, for me, the most competent people. In some ways, the players who I've played with who've clung on to their profile before they had it, or tried to enhance the profile before they had it, are the ones who've not had any longevity in the sport.
Yep.
You know, and because they've already fallen short, they've already accepted the trappings of being in the public eye. And the reality of, like I said, what we do is just hard work. And then you don't see any of it. People don't see any of it, do they?
Yeah.
No.
They don't understand it. I can't tell you to understand my life. Like, I couldn't give you enough information for you to be able to understand.
I remember years ago when Solskjaer was the reserve team coach at United, and I got to know him a little bit during that period. And
Is that another name you just dropped?
There you go, yeah.
I've got a basket down here.
Go on.
But I'll give you context, because at the time he was struggling with this transition of being a coach, with this next generation coming through. So his reserve team coaching was like meeting kids, and he made a great comment where he said, what I'm realising is some of these kids like being a footballer, they just don't like playing football. Because he was saying to him, he said he'd come in and he'd say, oh, did you watch the Champions League last night? No, I didn't know it was on. Or, you know, the idea of staying behind, and he'd say, oh, do shooting practice with you. Oh, no, I've got to get off. And he said it came like as a bit of a daunting moment for him, that he'd lived in a cocoon of loving the sport and then meeting kids that were coming through that actually weren't that bothered about it.
That's another common phrase, put the ball away. You know, like the amount of times you do start speaking about rugby as a professional rugby player, and you might be having a chat, you'll be heckled by one of your teammates, put the ball away, you dickhead, you know. And that is another trend. Yeah.
Is a mindset then something that you can actually crack and complete, or is it something that is it something really that's quite simple because there is a formula to it? Is it something that you need to train? Can you live, essentially what I'm trying to ask is, can you live the perfect life and a carefree life because you've cracked that?
No, I don't think, no. And I think what I'd say is that there's no formula to any of this stuff as well. We're all complex.
But the books
creatures.
always try and make it so formulaic.
Yeah, and again, that if there was anyone listening, I'd often say, treat anything like that with real caution. When somebody tells you it's simple, when somebody tells you that this is easy or this is a formula, treat it with caution, because there's no formulas out there. There's nothing that, if there's no one size fits all that does work, and that's why it has to be very much person centered. You start from you start from the inside out. You work out what the person's got, how they structure, how they view the world, and then try and help them navigate it from that position, rather than going from outside in and tell them what they should be doing and how they should be thinking or feeling.
Because in the same sense of how Instagram has intensified and taken over everyone's lives in the last 5 years, something like that. For me, it seems every time you walk into a bookshop, or you go into an airport and you go into a WH Smith's, there is a wall of self-help books, self-help authors. I mean, you've been in the game a long time, but do you think almost that there are too many conflicting, contradicting ideas, that actually this is making it a muddle for everyone to try and even simplify it in their own heads?
Yeah, very much. Yeah, and you're right. I treat it with caution because I like writing the books, I like doing the research and trying to make it evidence based. Because I think people do want the sense that if I want to give this a go, I want to have some kind of confidence that this has been well researched. This isn't just like some pop psychology, somebody just giving me an idea off a shelf, or like when I go into teams, like one of my big aversions is gimmickry. I often say, be careful of anybody that's using a gimmick. If it's not something that they're prepared to go back and use repeatedly, it just ends up being a gimmick. You know, like I'd even say when you go into clubs and they have like these quotes on the walls, and I always go, get that off.
But top level clubs have
yeah,
those.
they have it, and they go like, winners never quit, quitters never win, and you go, well, sometimes they do. Yeah. or what message are you giving there? That it's all contradictory, but people do it without necessarily thinking about the impact.
I guess there's a line though, isn't there, between gimmickry, you know, quotes on a wall, for example, might, oh look, there's one behind us right here. Dark and true and tender is the North. Thank you, Northern Monk, for letting us use the facilities again. Lovely beer, by the way. You cracked up your beer down there.
It's absolutely lovely.
No, but in all seriousness, quotes and gimmickry, there's that side that perhaps if you're in a tunnel, I don't know, you guys tell me, if you were in a tunnel and you saw some quotes on a wall and it kind of just made you just think in a slightly different way before you ran out onto a pitch, would that have any impact at all? Never.
Ever. Not once in my career have I walked out of a tunnel, looked at words. And
you like quotes though?
I like quotes, and not often do I walk out in a tunnel and see something that instantly inspires me, but you know, the Lombardi's come up with some crackers, and I haven't.
Such a rugby league. Lombardi's come up with some crackers.
He's come up with some belters, and just to fail to prepare to fail, and little ones like that just reinforce what I've always thought's got me. Because you know, I'm not the most talented, but I always try and think I've worked as hard as I possibly could to reach the top of me, you know, potential. So stuff like that just reinforces to me that, you know, there's other people who's done fantastically well in their careers that, you know, have lived by the same kind of theories. So I don't discount all quotes. Some quotes are absolute tissue.
But I'd also say it's an individual thing, isn't it? So the fact that a number of quotes could mean the same thing to a group of 30 blokes, and then therefore each member extracts something. You could have 10 quotes on a wall and somebody would look at one of them and go, oh, that's the one. That means something to me. So therefore the understanding of like the self-awareness for an athlete comes through. You have to understand that on your own. It's not a team thing for me. I knew that Wilkin would be offended by the exploration of my mind is my responsibility. It's not my teammates. It's not a team thing, is it? And I often think sometimes what we try and do is stimulate behaviour in sport by writing things on a wall. And for me, that just...
But that's it though, isn't it? If that's not for you,
it's
not for you. But if that works for one person...
In the gym, we had Friedrich Nietzsche, he was like a philosopher from the 1800s who went on to actually, they reckon, influence sort of far right sort of thinking in Germany, which is, that's probably contentious in itself. But I found it ironic that we had this on the wall, you know, this quote from Friedrich Nietzsche. But I find words are really useful. I know what you're saying, Kev. Like I do find words really useful, and like you said, if those words are there and they're helping someone, then fair play. But repetition in sport and people imitate each other. So somebody saw words on a wall, thought, we need 3 words to describe us. Then another team thought, you're honest, disciplined, tough, right, let's put that on the wall. Let's have a session and we'll get to these 3 words. Ultimately, those 3 words, what do they mean? It's actions, it's disciplines, it's things, it's not words, it's things that matter.
I remember going to Knowsley Road and I think the change room was either pink or brown or something, and it had been painted purposely to demotivate
suppress
us.
Mood.
So we had a motivational tool, right? They're trying to suppress us here. Right, let's go out. And it was the opposite effect, but I think everyone's trying to get that extra 1% over. And I get the quotes. sometimes I think we're a bit quote happy, and you know that's another social media tool.
Well, exactly, and that's what I was asking Kev to Damian was, and this is by no means, don't get me wrong, belittling what you do, because your books are fantastic, but it has become a fad. It has become fashionable. This lifestyle, mindfulness, mindset.
Yeah.
This wasn't a rap when I was growing up. That wasn't accessible. That wasn't forced down your throat. It's forced down your throat now, and which may be great.
People are more self-aware. Well, I think you're mistaken.
No, but is that what it is? People are more self. Well, there you go. You may have answered.
If purely right, if I look at this in a business perspective, it's supply and demand. Like the demand, it has to be there for this information. Books don't sell themselves. People buy these books because they're interested. Now,
so why have we become more self-aware?
Because I think, you know, that's the way that we're evolving over time. We understand the implications of mental health. We talk about it. People want to be more productive. I think there's a journey of self-awareness. We don't understand the human mind. I think that's one of the things that we're trying to get to grips with. And I think that's maybe
we've had a long time since apes to understand that. I mean, it seems in our lifetime this has just intensified, isn't it? When you speak to generations gone by, you speak to your parents, speak to your grandparents. It wasn't even a consideration, a winning mindset. We just cracked on with life.
Yeah, but then I also think that that's almost like a bit of a survivor's mentality. You know, like you get like people that go, oh, back in the day it was a tough school and things like that. But what that doesn't account for is there was an awful lot of casualties of people that maybe didn't survive in that environment because it was brutal. You know, like almost too brutal. So sometimes you have to be careful of like survivor syndrome of the people that survived that school telling you that it was better back in the day when there'd have been plenty of people that would have found it intolerable and probably did. You know, like you hear about like some of the old rugby league guys that you'd meet from the 70s and things like that, and they say, oh, it was better back in the day, but physically they wrecked because there wasn't the same duty of care and attention given to these guys.
And I think there's a lot more labels now mentally. You know, you go to school and, you know, if you wasn't as intelligent as someone else, you'd just be on, you know, the thick table back in the day. But now, you know, they're not thick, they're autistic or dyslexic. It's not that. So they've labelled people, and we've come on loads in the last probably 10 years.
And society will always wear rose-tinted glasses. That's not going to change.
Yes, yeah, that's very much what we do. It's that hindsight thing that we're great at looking back and saying, oh, it was better back in the day.
Yeah.
And I'm often, like just as we were talking about projecting forward, it's dangerous to say, oh, this new generation. I think projecting backwards as if it was better then. I was in Argentina last year with the team, and I walked in the room one evening, and I said, "What's it?" And they were all sat round in a darker room watching Love Island.
This is the Argentina football team?
Yeah, it was the Scotland rugby guys.
Okay. Yeah.
And my first instinct was, like, when I understood what Love Island was, because I thought it's not aimed at my generation and things like that. And
careful, don't get Wilkins started on Love Island.
No, but my first instinct was to go, what about these lads do? And then you step away and go, you know what, they're all sat in a communal environment, they're all watching TV, they're laughing, they're joking about something that it's a shared experience. So you go, that's actually a really good thing. It doesn't matter what it is they're watching. The concept of them all sat together as a team, enjoying a communal experience is valuable. And I think we need to be careful sometimes of then going, oh, this snowflake generation, the millennial generation, when you go, I think there's things that are going to be constant, the idea of wanting to belong to a group, wanting to feel valued, wanting to feel psychologically safe, not be hammered for differences. That's going to be they're universal concepts that will go through generations that were there back in the day, and they'll be there in the future as well.
Do you think self-awareness is perceived as soft?
Often,
in a modern sporting sense.
Yeah, very much.
Not just
because
in sport, is it? In life.
Yeah, because again, it's easy to to reflect on something and think like I often think the last bastion of the dickhead is when I hear people excuse banter, and they go, "It's banter, mate, it's banter." And I often think whenever I hear that used, it's often used by a small group of people, targeted.
It's an insecure attack.
It's an insecure attack because often it's not amusing. It's something personal that's dressed up.
And that was what your sports was about pre-World Cup, the banter and getting away with basically bullying and being a prick, and then putting the banter label on it. And that was one of the best things, how the group came together, because there was banter, but there was no dickheads.
Yeah, that's it.
And we
there's
found a
distinction.
perfect balance. And if you speak to anyone on that World Cup tour in 17, that was the overriding emotion. Everyone got on, best mates.
Yeah, very much.
One thing that fascinates me in the winning mindset is, and I'll go into this with another Stephen Hawking quote. Is that number 4 for the day, John? I'm not quite sure. I know how much you love quotes, but he also, it's a short one. He also said that life would be tragic if it weren't funny. And think how true that is. Just think that this revolving ball that we're on, this fireball with a thing called a sun, which is apparently getting closer and closer to us, that could kill us at any day, and we're all here just trying to behave normally on a spinning sphere. The concept is quite strange, but fun is the chapter in the winning mindset, or a segment in the winning mindset, and within it says on average a child laughs 400 times a day. Compared to your adult who averages 15 laughs a day. So what's happened to those 385 other laughs? How important is humour as a characteristic then when, potentially you don't have that, things are tragic, as Stephen Hawking said?
Well, humour is about connecting different ideas, so it opens up your brain, and that's where creativity comes from. To make somebody laugh has to be two separate ideas connecting. So which is what you're getting people thinking, and so it's incredibly valuable within that working environment. People feel safe when you're laughing. There's this idea, and it's a communal experience, so it goes back to all the things of a healthy culture. You belong in, there's a shared experience, you're all in it together, there's a certain level of vulnerability.
But it can also be a cage for people's insecurities, humour.
Yeah, exactly, and that's where the banter thing of taking the piss out of somebody for something that they can't afford. So it's not that humour isn't valuable, but it's that delicate line that if I'm laughing at something that you can't help or that you can't influence or change, there's something there that then you're tapping into somebody else's vulnerability. So what you create, so I'll give you an example. That many years ago with one of the rugby league clubs I worked at, there was a physio that was there, and it crossed the line several times in terms of the way this guy was treated, and people had excused it as banter, but it was bullying of this guy that went on in terms of phoning him up at night and sending some of the young lads in with bogus claims and things like that. And in the end, this physio was removed from the job at the end of the season. I remember saying to the coaches, it's a dangerous game you're playing, because if you're a young apprentice coming into that squad for the first time and you're seeing a bloke getting bullied that maybe is a little bit out of his depth, there's an unconscious message you're sending there of, what do I do if I don't know what to do? Do I put my hand up and admit ignorance, or do I just feign and keep my head down and hope that nobody spots that I'm out of my depth? Which is what happens. You just remove that sense of safety. So whenever that happens, I always think people responsible in that environment need to get on it incredibly quickly.
That's what you mentioned, Kev, earlier, isn't it? Of disguising your willingness to go into that world because of the uncertainty behind it.
Definitely, and Wayne Bennett's been the best coach I've ever come across, just in terms of his integrity and how much he cared for players, and his message was live above the line, and as soon as you go below the line, you'll be out the squad, and that wasn't make your tackles and make hard work. That was just being a good person around the group and 24 hours a day. And I think that's why he's stood the test of time. The game's changed phenomenally over 40 years he's been coaching, but his record speaks for itself, and it's all about living above that line, being a good person, and I know for a fact that there's really, really good players who never made that squad because of the reputation that they had preceding the squad announcement. So, and I think that's invaluable. If you've got a good group of people, you can go a long way, but you only need a couple and it becomes cancerous and spreads.
Well, like Damian said, we're in a people industry, aren't we? Yep. Essentially, good people and living the right way, and essentially, if your team's made up of good people, you're in a good spot, aren't you? It's the recruitment of those people and understanding and identifying those people that's a challenge. And I'll go back to when I first met Damian in 2006, because he was talking about this sort of a bullying culture. And when I look back now, my first sort of 3 or 4 years at St Helens, it was a bullying culture that we had. It was ruthless. It was a lot of that banter before it was labelled banter. Was dished out, and I always remember we were sat on a bus. We used to get on the bus in Manly, and as people came on the bus, the sort of the St Helens lads would pop up, dish some abuse out and drop down again. And that was just our way, that was normal for me. And it's probably Damian was the first person that made me realise at that time that wasn't normal. I remember we had a conversation, but you found that quite interesting, didn't you, to observe?
Well, it was intriguing, wasn't it? Because what I could see was people would sort of like, you could see them brace themselves to walk past the St Helens bit of the bus, and you go, that can't be healthy. Or like, you'd see some guys at wince when there was a comment made, wouldn't they? It might be something about like having a big nose or like not having enough hair or something. And it was something that you go, why would you want to create an environment where one of your teammates
shouts from a distance?
Oh, it wasn't that bad. Well, I'm talking in a
no,
very tight
it was literally like just walking past the bus. But
yeah, price like that.
It was interesting because it ties into what we just said about that anonymous nature of, you know, shouting that abuse, but no one knows that that's come from.
Yeah,
throwing our voices.
It wasn't that, was it? But then but what was interesting was it was when the St Helens lads would do it when they were all sat together. Do you know what I mean? As opposed to if it was just one lad sat on his own making a comment, you go, well, you're taking your chances there that somebody might deal with you. But when there was a rump, and these were all guys that were well respected, like core group of the team as well. So it wasn't like they were vulnerable squad players.
Security in the collective.
It was that pack mentality, and it's like you're excluding people from the pack as they walk past.
Yeah. We was having a joke about this at the weekend, Blake Austin, and he was getting some banter off Chris Hill, and he said, I heard about this the other day. It was Gary V who was speaking about it, and he's a big social media, and he was saying if you wanted the biggest skyscraper in New York, you can either build yours bigger or you can knock the biggest one down. And he said, Illy, that's what you do all the time. You're trying to knock everyone down to promote yourself. And I think that was a bit of joking, and Illy's not. He's always like,
is that a disclaimer?
Is that what Al
Illy's a good
Qaeda
captain,
did?
and he's not a self-promoter. But there is people out there who feel the need, they're insecure themselves. So to build themselves up, they'll put shit on other people.
I was saying I did that book on Barcelona looking at culture, and there was a fascinating quote that Guardiola had given that when he came in, he got rid of Ronaldinho, Deco, and Eto'o. And one of the things he'd said is because their behaviours were falling below the line. So there was a brilliant stat around Ronaldinho that one of his teammates that I interviewed said if he retired from playing, he just didn't tell anyone. So for 18 months, he was living the life of a playboy. And in that same period, 10 out of the 23 players in the squad separated or divorced from their partners. And a number of them were caught in sort of compromising situations, partying with him. So when Guardiola came in, he got rid of the three of them and said, let's start again. And he recruited 4 guys. Pedro Busquets came up through the youth academy. He brought in Mascherano and Piqué. And I found a quote in the Catalan press that he gave where he said he recruited them on the basis that they didn't have stupid haircuts, fancy, sleeve tattoos, or wear earrings. Which you go, well, that's a fascinating thing to talk about in modern football. But his argument was, he said, I've got no problem with any of those things aesthetically, but I was looking for something around the identity of these people. And I was looking for how they made decisions when nobody else was watching. And I wanted people that didn't want to stand out in a crowd. I wanted people that wanted to fit into a group because their influence. So then you talk about there's that quote, or that line, that word in there, identity. So you say, when you make a decision, you do things through one of 2 criteria. Sometimes you'll make a decision based on cost versus benefit. You'll say, is this worth my time to say something to hit? So say like you're in a gym and you see somebody leaving the weights lying around, and you might make a decision and go, is it really worth my time to tell him to pick those weights up? Is he likely to kick off? Is it really that important? I could do it. So you do it cost versus benefit. Or another way you do it is you go, well, what sort of person am I? What's this situation? What would somebody like me do in this situation? And that's when you make a decision based on identity. So I'm not bothered whether we have a row. I'm not bothered if you don't like me. It offends me that you're leaving those weights behind. And if you get enough people that act through identity rather than cost versus benefit, that's where you start to move a group along.
Just going on that, like I've captained a couple of clubs, and I've always thought, you know, you've got to choose your battles. You know, if you pick up on everything, you come across as a bit of a, do you get what I'm saying? You just become over the top. And where's the line in sort of because that annoys everyone, leaving weights out. But
Sure.
you know, just leaving a water bottle on the floor. But if I did it, you know, every time, pick your bottle up, you'd end up like a school teacher, and they'd be like, when you needed to send a message that, you know, you really needed everyone to follow. So that's always been on my mind consciously when I have captain sides.
Well, then
which is the
sometimes
best
it's
way
a
to do
brilliant
it.
question, because then sometimes it's where you're impacted. Well, first of all, you need to identify what the rules of the game are. So if you've not identified that one of the things you will do, so say you talk about discipline in your team, you say, that's going to be one of our trademarks, discipline. Yeah. And you agree that everyone signs up to it and says, when we're at our best, we're a disciplined team. So somebody leaving weights out now, that transgresses the rule that everyone signed up to, the behavioural rule, that we would be disciplined, so then you can address it. Whereas if you haven't agreed that discipline is a rule and you say it, somebody goes, well, I didn't sign up to that.
Yeah.
That it offends you.
Well, there's a
Doesn't
chapter in
bother
there, ambiguity is the enemy.
Yeah. So you need to strip the ambiguity to then say, if we've agreed that, I'll challenge you until you start doing something different.
Yeah.
So there's a great example of the Barcelona one that is worth it, that they spoke about this idea of humility. Don't come in here showing off your wealth, your privilege, your status. Come in here and be humble. And then there's a young guy who makes his debut for them, scores a goal and starts doing a samba dance. And the captain comes over and clips him around the ear and stops him. And then comes out in the press conference afterwards and issues an apology to the opposition. And his point is, we don't do that kind of thing here. We're not trying to embarrass the opposition. We're not behaving... You don't do elaborate samba dances. You score your goal and you go back. You don't try and humiliate the opposition. So, and everybody signed up to it because he said, we've all signed up to being humble.
Yeah.
So when he transgresses it, we can deal with it and everyone accepts it's justice being applied. So what I'd often say is the danger is, if you've not agreed the behaviours, you challenging people then becomes, Kev's moaning again.
Sort of counterproductive to,
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think there's a big pressure on sports. For me, it's all about recruitment. Is professional sport is all about recruitment, and you can influence a team that are made up of the wrong people. I know you can do that. You can change things, but ultimately, the most fundamental concept in our sport is recruitment. You know, understanding what you need and then getting those people is massive. And if you don't understand what the behaviours look like and what you want, what the end goal is, what the product is, then, you know, how do you even go about recruiting somebody?
Yeah, I think that, and again, see, I think rugby league's a fascinating sport for that, because I think whilst recruitment is important, you don't have the churn that other sports have. You know, like the wealth isn't there to just pay somebody off and move them on. So I think the important recruitment becomes even more paramount then. So if you're going to only get 2 or 3 shots at it, you want to make sure you've got the right people that you're bringing in. I remember at Warrington years ago when Tony Smith had first come in, and some of his recruitment was based on people that not necessarily were good players, but were vocal, that would stand up and challenge some of the accepted practices. But you have to know what the behaviours you want are before you do, because otherwise people make excuses, he's a good player. But you go, but he's toxic. You know what I mean? He's going to cause...
in sport, that's so common, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, I remember...
Competency on the field is assumed as competency often.
I remember doing some work years ago at West Brom, and they recruited, at the time, Nicholas Anelka. And it didn't work out, and everyone went, it's because of him. And you go, actually, it wasn't. But everyone went, So he came in, and he was like the ultra-professional. So he was quite quiet, self-effacing, just got on with the job. But what nobody had taken into account was there was 4 French African lads that were already part of the squad. And Anelka came in, and we were talking about these cultural architects. He was the daddy of the French Africans because of his technical and his career. And one of the social activities was the players used to meet for breakfast every morning in the staff canteen, and Anelka had come in, realised that he was a strict Muslim. He didn't prepare the food in the manner that he wanted. So he used to go and eat somewhere, eat in his hotel, and then come in a bit later and go straight to the dressing room to get changed. And what happened was, over time, the other 4 French African lads started to gravitate and go and get changed with him and stop going for breakfast. And nobody said anything until it started going wrong, and then everyone went, there's a clique here. And they blamed him for it. When you go, well, the problem had happened a lot earlier than that, rather than say... Yeah. So people often, it's that hindsight bias again, that afterwards everyone goes, it's Anelka that's a problem. And the reality was, he was,
Damian, it's always fascinating to have you in. We could talk for hours, couldn't we? We really could. It's a fascinating topic. Well, we never know what we're going to get onto. We just let it roll, and there we go. Just finally, I know because I mentioned at the top you had Muhammad Ali, Tiger Woods, Sir Alex Ferguson, Serena McGeekin, who's on the front of the Winning Minds, that's saying simple and effective ideas about how to improve performance. What's the best accolade you've had, the most sort of one I'll ask you which book you're most proud of at the top. But
oh, wow. That's
on your wall, you could get it printed as
I'm working out in the gym.
Not anywhere near John because he's not interested.
My walls are clear.
Ali's got to be up there, isn't he? What did he say? He must have said something.
Yeah, so the Ali one, we spoke about this, didn't we, last year, where I went out to Atlanta to go and interview him. I would say it was better, it sounds better than it was, because he was obviously in quite poor health. So he got tired quite easily, and it was sometimes quite difficult to understand his stuff. But he liked the common sense nature of it. I think he'd always been interested. He was a pioneer of psychology in sport without necessarily knowing what he was doing. I think he was marrying it up. I don't know. I think sometimes it's the quieter qualities where people just quietly tell you that you've helped rather than anything that sounds too highfalutin.
Mm-hmm. Well, top man, really appreciate you.
No, thank you.
Kev, great to see you. Don't forget you can download Out of Your League at Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts, Podbean, Spotify. Watch us on YouTube. Get in touch at Super League. Use the hashtag Out of Your League. We'll see you again next week. And I think it's fair to say, as many self-help books that John Wilkin reads, he's still going to be a massive knob. Good night.